All right, yeah, good evening here and people online. Yeah, the English speaking ones and then my Spanish friends and Kiko in this incredible job in translating everything. So welcome back. You didn't die, so that's a good sign. So don't die for some time, okay? And a bit more part. So that's amazing. Today very auspicious day as well. Point of view elements. Okay, yeah, come. Yeah. So welcome. So we're going to talk about refuge, and that's for about 3 sessions. So refuge is very important. We say discovering Buddhism. So if you want to really discover Buddhism, then you have to discover refuge. You have to know what it means for a person to take a safe direction, so to say, for Buddhists. You know? If you're Buddhist or not doesn't matter. We just explain it, and then you see for yourself, right? You check for yourself. As I said before, this course and other courses we run here at Jamyang is not meant to make people Buddhists. That should be very clear. But it's meant to share the knowledge of Buddhism, you know, and then to whatever extent you want to put it into practice, that is your own wish and your own kind of interest, whatever direction you want to take it. Yeah. Though I sometimes also explain things in a more traditional way because I'm a kind of traditional guy, but that's also for me kind of responsibility. Yeah, that as you know. So that's for those who are quite new. There's a few new people. So yeah, it's good to know that. So before we start, as we know, it's always important to generate correct motivation, depending on your motivation, whatever physical, verbal, or mental activity you engage in depends on the motivation. If the motivation is pure, then the outcome of that activity is pure, or good or bad, depends on your intention. So for that purpose, it's important to generate correct motivation, in particular for the start of the cycle for this year, and then especially for refuge. So try to think that you're engaging in this session and all coming up Thursday evenings, right? Yeah, something Thursday evenings, that you are doing this course in order to train your mind, become a better human being, and then all the way up to achieving liberation and enlightenment for the benefit of all modern sentient beings. So try to think in that way or generate a kind of motivation for yourself. Yeah.
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times I prostrate. Tayata gate gate para samgate bodhi soha. Gate para samgate bodhi soha. Tayata gate para samgate bodhi soha.
Sangye
Chodang Soke Chonam La Jaje Bade Dagi Kyapse Chi Dagi Chunin Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penche Sange Juba
Sangye
Chodang Soke Chonam La Jaje Bade Dagi Kyapse Chi Dagi Chunin Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penche Sange Juba Sangye Chodang Soke Chonam La Jaje Bade Dagi Kyapse Chi Dagi Chunin Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penche Sange Juba Shu.
Chutun kangi tusin is betawa tangchi bang damage dun so go down de la chat low. Yeah, so maybe just what we just read, a refuge and bodhicitta prayer, so that's perfect to start with. I thought about another quotation, another quotation where it says, Sangye Chodang Gerunde, Tarpa Dugyan Namgi Kyap. There's a kind of a very interesting verse where it says, those who wish liberation, yeah, if you wish for liberation and want to be free of suffering, then the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha is a refuge, is a safe direction, so to say. Yeah, if you really want liberation, then you have to go in a particular direction, right? So then we say, for that purpose, you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Also, the refuge prayer we just read, where it says, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about the three jewels, as we say, or the three sublime ones, sometimes it's been translated, or the three rare sublime ones. Yeah, so the three jewels of refuge, that's for Buddhists, their direction. If you want to achieve liberation, it's a direction. If you want to be free of the lower realms and get another precious human rebirth, that's your safe direction. And also, if you want to achieve enlightenment, that's the safe direction. Yeah, so we talked about quite a few times before about the three scopes of the Lamrim. Yeah, so the three motivations of the Lamrim, either want to achieve a precious human rebirth, like we have now, you know, in future states of existence, or want to get rid of samsara, yeah, or get liberated from samsara. Yeah, so also their refuge is important. And also if you want to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, it's important. Yeah, so we talked about the three scopes a few times before last year. So there's a particular direction of taking refuge according to those three scopes as well. Anyway, we come to that later. So refuge or safe direction, you know, in life, safe direction in the spiritual part. Yeah, so you can take refuge in various ways. We take refuge in the doctor when we're sick, right? When you're sick, you want to get better, so you take trust in a good doctor. Yeah, and also sometimes you need a second opinion, so you check things out, and then you think, okay, this is the right kind of direction, so let's take the treatment. Yeah, so there you check. Yeah, when you're sick and you want to get rid of the sickness, you analyze the doctor, you analyze the medicine, if there are side effects or not. And then there's people who help you when you're sick. Yeah, so it can be a nurse. So they're very similar in the three jewels of refuge. Yeah? We have a doctor, the Buddha, for example. Yeah. And we have the medicine, which is the Dharma or the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. And we have people in the Sangha community, so to say, who can help us and support us in the curing process. Yeah, so we actually all sick. Yeah, so so from today, I mean, probably you know already, we all sick, not just physically sometimes also, but mentally we all quite sick. Yeah, so we function quite okay in society, but actually we're quite sick, you know. And why are we sick? Because we have afflictions. Yeah, we have afflictions of anger, strong desire, jealousy, pride, anxiety, fear, depression, negative thoughts, you know. So there's a sickness there, you know, that we can all, I think, acknowledge. So we need a medicine for that, you know. Unfortunately, you know, physical drugs or medication can only bring a benefit to a certain extent. You know, There's limitations to the physical world, you know. But the mind doesn't have any limitations if you put things into practice. And then we can see in great practitioners who accomplished certain levels of realization, we can see that they do mind-boggling things. You know? Like often I mentioned Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who unfortunately recently passed away. Yeah, he was a person who were capable of going without sleep, for example. You know, so if we go without sleep for a few nights, then we get sick or it's difficult, right? But Rinpoche never slept, you know, sometimes 10 minutes and maximum 10, 15 minutes. That's it, sitting, right? Never laying down. So that's a kind of a capacity of the mind, right? That's not something of the body, for example. Yeah. So there are these incredible yogis who can live without food or can live without water and food in kind of certain remote areas in retreat. So, and it's not only a Buddhist thing, also in certain Hindu traditions, we can see there are these yogis living in the mountains without any food or drink or clothing sometimes. Yeah, so that's a capacity of the mind, you know, and that's sometimes good to hear those stories. It can be very inspiring to hear those stories, you know, that people can live in circumstance because the potential of the mind is beyond imagination. Yeah, so the body has limitations, but the mind does not. Yeah, so if we are sick and we have these afflictions of attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, anxiety, fear, depression, you know, negative thoughts, that's our sickness, you know. So we need a doctor. We need not just any doctor. We need a very skillful doctor. Yeah. In particular, if you want to eliminate all those afflictions, yeah, can you imagine to have a life without anger or hatred? It's quite nice, right? So, but to accomplish that level is not an easy task. You know, you have to put a lot of effort. It's possible because we all have the potential, as we talked about many times, that the afflictions we have or these destructive emotions we have, they basically are not an innate part of the most ultimate nature of the mind. Yeah, so because if you go into deep meditation, you can reach certain stages, there's no afflictions present. Yeah, so that means that the afflictions are not an innate part of the mind, you know, because they're not always present. We know that, right? I hope that most of you are not angry at the moment, so that you can see that the affliction, anger is not always present. Yeah, so that means that it's not an innate part of the mind. Was it an innate part of the mind? It should be always present. Yeah, that's not the case. So that's one reason why afflictions can be taken away. We talked about a few times. Another reason is that afflictions come, abide, and disintegrate by the power of cause and conditions. Yeah, you wake up with a nice dream, and you actually want to go back to bed to redream the dream, but unfortunately you have to go to work, or then during breakfast you read a few messages or email, and then you, oh, this person again. Yeah. So that message triggers an irritation in your mind, right? So it's a condition, you see. So that means that every form of an affliction is triggered, or they have these nice commercials wanting to sell you this newest chocolate cream or whatever you're attached to, or pizza or holiday whatsoever. Yeah, you see it, you didn't think about it before, and then you see it, oh, actually I need this, right? So that means that strong desire or anger as such, yeah, these afflictions, they get triggered and then they get activated. The seeds get activated, you could say, and then it becomes manifest. So you can see it's a cause and effect relationship, right? Afflictions, they come because they get triggered by a particular kind of message or seeing something, and then you act. Yeah, and then over time they also disappear again. So you can see it's a play with causes and conditions, right? So that's another reason why afflictions can be taken away if you use the right causes and conditions to take into account to transform your mind. Yeah, so there's another reason why we can actually eliminate afflictions or destructive emotions. Yeah? That's the second reason. Yeah, the first one is that we saw that afflictions are not really omnipresent, are not an innate part of the mind. Yeah. The second reason is that afflictions come by the power of cause and conditions. Yeah. And the third reason is that afflictions are not in accordance with reality. Yeah, so when you get angry at a person, you overestimate the faults of that individual, right? And then your best friend pats you on the shoulder and said, come on, this person does this well, that well, it's not all too bad. You say, no, no, not true, right? Because if anger is this one-pointed focused aspect on the faults of a situation or an individual, you know, and that's not reality. You know, Iron Beck, one of the psychiatrists of the University of Pennsylvania, for example, he came to very similar conclusions, right? He says 80 to 90% that appears to the mind of a person who is, you know, emotionally hijacked by a rage of anger, 80 to 90% of what the person perceives is not a reality. Yeah? So that means that same with our attachment to our favorite food, then we think, oh, if I have this, so amazing. And we order it online, as we talked about a few times, and then it arrives, and then it doesn't look as a picture, and then it's not hot. It's not as spicy as you want to have it. And then, you know, it's kind of no satisfaction, basically, because we have those expectations, because we think about the qualities of this object, you know, and then we meet the object, and those qualities are not really there. It's just created in the mind. And so same with the faults we see of a person we're angry at is created in the mind. Yeah, so that proves that what we perceive when an affliction is very strong is not a reality, you know. And because it's not a reality, we can eliminate it with understanding reality. Yeah, same as we always talked about the famous example in the train. You think you're moving, when you see some movement in the corner of your eyes, you think, oh, we're moving. You look at a platform, you see, oh, no, it's the other train that's moving. After that insight of reality, you don't believe you're moving anymore, right? So that means if you have a correct understanding of reality, these afflictions also over time they lose their potential to become manifest. Yeah, so the afflictions we can actually eventually eliminate. Yeah, so we need a very good doctor for that purpose, you know, and not just any doctor, a real skillful doctor of the mind. Yeah, and in particular, if you then think about, I want to get a precious human rebirth, or you want to get liberated from samsara, or you want to go all the way up to enlightenment, you need a very skillful person, right? Yeah, so we need a skillful doctor. So we can say the Buddha, in that regard, we consider as a doctor. Yeah, and then the Buddha says to us, okay, look, I cannot take away your suffering. I cannot wash away your sins. You know, I cannot give my insights or my realizations to you. I cannot do that. And it's a reality. Otherwise, the Buddha would have done that already. But the Buddha said, I can show you the method how to do it. I've done it, and I can show you the method. You know? So that's kind of what we say, the Buddha is capable of doing that. And on top of that, we sometimes talk about the Buddha has four, from the point of view of refuge, 4 features or 4 qualities. Yeah, for those who really like to study a bit more, you can write them down. That the Buddha himself, the first quality is that the Buddha himself is free of afflictions and their seeds, right? So that's a person we can trust. You know, if you have a person who is full of afflictions, it's very difficult to put your trust in this person, because before you know it, this person will misuse you, or the afflictions come up and do wrong things and harm others. You need a person who is free of afflictions if you want to be free yourself, right? So same if you want to stop smoking, you don't go to people who smoke to get rid of smoking, right? That doesn't work, you know. You have to have a person who's smoked before and who have given it up and knows how to talk to you. Same if you have a depression and you want to talk with a person who had a depression before and solved it, then that person can help you, right? Otherwise, it's difficult. So that's what I mean. The Buddha, we say, is free of afflictions. Yeah, so that's a person we can trust. He had afflictions before, like you and me, but then got rid of it, and he knows how to do it. Yeah, so that's the first point, is that the Buddha is free of fears of suffering, as we say, or the Buddha is free of afflictions. That's the meaning. Yeah, the Buddha is free of afflictions. That's the first quality of the Buddha, and that's also why we can trust the Buddha, right? Can you imagine if all politicians don't have afflictions anymore? it would be quite a pleasant planet, I think. Yeah. So that means that if you have a person without afflictions, that's a person who really you can trust. You can really ask for help. Yeah. So yeah, because sometimes you see all these politicians, they're motivated sometimes with afflictions, right? Of gain and fame and reputation and money and attachment to gain and anger to its, those who opposing that, Yeah. So yeah, so the Buddha is free of all that. Yeah, so the Buddha, the first point, the Buddha is free of afflictions. Yeah. The second point is that the Buddha is very skillful in explaining how to do it, or the methodology, so to say. Yeah. So in Buddhism, so the Buddha has very skillful means. Yeah. There's a second point, that the Buddha really knows how actually to lead each and every individual to the next level. And because the Buddha has an omniscient mind, or an all-knowing mind, so it knows exactly what we are thinking or what we are doing or what kind of emotions come up in our mind. For example, one of my friends, he was also a student, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche also has this incredible clairvoyance, reading other people's mind and those kind of things. So then once my friend was doing retreat in a remote area in the mountains, and he was actually thinking about the beach all the time. He was doing a Vajrasattva retreat, but he had quite some attachment to going to the beach. So his mind was more at the beach than actually at the Vajrasattva retreat he was doing. So he came out of the retreat, saw Rinpoche, and then offered a retreat to Rinpoche. And then Rinpoche said, "Oh, how was the Vajrasattva beach retreat?" So that means that Rinpoche knew that he was thinking about the beach all the time. Yeah. So if you have a kind of a teacher, or in this case a Buddha, who is capable of knowing your mind, he's capable of helping you a lot, right? Yeah. So he knows exactly what are the problems and how do we to solve it. Yeah. So that means the Buddha is very skillful, and the Buddha has various methods, how to train the mind, as we see in the Lamrim, and we see in various schools of tenets. Yeah, more coarser forms of afflictions being explained, or more subtler forms of affliction being explained, and move in that direction step by step. So that's why the Buddha is very skillful in the second point. The Buddha is very skillful in the way of the methodology, so to say. Yeah, you can see that the various teachers, they're very skillful in step by step lead us to the next level. Yeah, so that's kind of very important. Yeah, because we cannot jump straight away to Buddhahood. We have to go slowly, step by step. So yeah, the second quality of the Buddha is that the Buddha, after the first one being free of afflictions, the second one, the Buddha is very skillful in the methodology. Yeah. Then the third one is that the Buddha doesn't make a distinction between, those who are close or those who are distant, as we say, or friends and enemies. The Buddha doesn't make any distinction between friends and enemies. Why? Because friends and enemies, all of them, they want happiness, don't want suffering. The enemies are just temporarily, in an emotional hijack of afflictions. Yeah, it's like a person who's drunk. Basically, it's very similar. When a person is drunk and says something nasty to you, what do you say? It doesn't matter. He or she is drunk, right? So you don't really get hurt by what a person is saying. But actually, when people are out of anger or irritation or hatred, they say something wrong, it's actually very similar. They're not in control over their mind. So it's very similar to the drunk person. They just temporarily obscured by this affliction, anger, and the Buddha knows that. So that's why the Buddha doesn't make a distinction between friends and enemies, so to say, because both want happiness and don't want suffering. Both have the potential to eliminate all suffering and accomplish enlightenment. Even the worst criminal has the potential to change the mind. Yeah, so that's very clear. That, as we just saw, that afflictions can be taken away, and the Buddha knows that. Even the person who is the worst person on the planet, that person can eliminate affliction and can become a good person. So the Buddha knows that, and because that knowledge, then the Buddha said that he doesn't make a distinction between friend or enemy, because they're actually the same. And also over time, our dearest friends, when the relationship breaks up, becomes the worst enemy, right? Yeah, yeah. I was opening, you once told the story when we had teaching in Kopan just last winter. And then he says that, you know, some people say, oh, I can't wait to live with this person. I'll be so happy when I can live with this person. I'll be so happy. Oh, can't wait, can't wait, can't wait. So then the relationship starts and then breaks up. And oh, I want to be ready for this person. I can't wait for the day that I'm separated from this person. It's a very interesting kind of analogy, which sometimes happens, right? So that means that people change over time, you know, and that's the nature of reality. That's the nature of samsara. So also the Buddha knows that. So that's why the Buddha doesn't make a distinction between those who are, you know, close or those who are distant, as we say, or friends and enemies. Because basically those people over time, they change, right? They all both want happiness, don't want suffering, you know, they basically exactly the same. It's just temporary, a difference is there, you know, and we talked about, and we will talk about later also about meditation on equanimity, right? What is for you, your dearest friend, can be the worst enemy of somebody else, right? Yeah. So what is for you the worst enemy can be a friend of somebody else. It's very interesting. If you really look at it, everything is just very dependent upon our perception. You know, what we call a friend, somebody else calls an enemy. That person out there, you say friend. Somebody else says, I don't like this person. You say, I like this person. But the person is not both at the same time, right? Friend and enemy. You see? So it's very much depending on our perception. Yeah, and that's not only a Buddhist thing. Even Anil Seth, one of the neuroscientists we had a dialogue with, that he also says whatever is being perceived is more from inside out than outside in. Meaning whatever we perceive is influenced by our mental attitude or our own perception or our own ideas, right? Yeah, so we see things all differently, you know. So that's depending on our individual forms of consciousness or mind. Yeah, yeah. So the Buddha, third one, doesn't make a distinction between friend, enemy, or sometimes we say stranger. Yeah, people we don't know or we have an indifferent feeling towards too. But even the stranger on the street, you have an indifferent feelings towards too. Or you meet a person in public transport. Unfortunately, in modern times, people don't talk that much anymore in the trains, or train a little bit. But in the tube, yeah, it's quite difficult. People always, the mind is inside their phone, busy. They already have these headphones on all the time. So yeah, it's a bit, yeah. I see Kiko also holding his headphone. Yeah, our Spanish translator. Yeah, but that's a great purpose to that. Yeah. So yeah, so the Buddha doesn't make a distinction, because a stranger also, when you start to know the stranger more, then it can become a best friend, right? So that's also definitely there. So the Buddha has this insight, you know, that yeah, that there's no need to make a distinction, because those people are exactly the same. In a similar way, that's number 3, right? Number 4 means that the Buddha doesn't make a difference between those who harm and those who benefit the Buddha. Yeah, those who give presents and those who have an ugly face, or you know, or harm the Buddha, so to say. The Buddha doesn't make a distinction for the same reason as we just talked about, you know. So, you know, that the Buddha knows that the person who gives me gifts and the person who shows me an ugly face, those two people are actually the same in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, as we just talked about, right? So that's another aspect. And that's also a reason why we can trust the Buddha, because based on this teaching of compassion, you know, there's no really an equanimity. The Buddha doesn't make a distinction, you know. So that's kind of quite an interesting aspect, because next to being free of afflictions and having the methodology to help us, this kind of compassion for all, they would treat all beings equally, right? So treating all beings equally, that's the person you can trust, right? Yeah, who doesn't make any trouble, so to say, yeah? And only is there to benefit us, you know. So that's kind of 4 qualities, you could say, the Buddha has, you know. And also the various aspects of the other forms of refuge we're going to talk about have very similar qualities, yeah. But with the Buddha is easier to relate to as a beginner, yeah. So the Buddha is free of afflictions. He is skillful in the methodology, number 2. Number 3, is that he doesn't make distinction between friend and enemy. And number 4, he doesn't make a distinction between those who benefit and those who harm. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of a reasoning why we can think, oh, we can trust this person, you know. And Buddhism is very much like that, you know. For example, we try to respect any form of religion or faith because, you know, Buddhism is not the right fit for everybody. We have to be realistic, right? We have, what is it, 7, almost 8 billion maybe now? Yeah, people on the planet with different ideas, with different interests, with different inclinations, with different habituation patterns. We cannot expect everybody will benefit from Buddhism, right? So there's some benefit from Buddhism, some benefit from Christianity or Hindu tradition or Islam or whatsoever. So we have to respect that. Yeah, we can never force people to follow a particular form of faith or religion, right? Yeah. So yeah, and every form of faith or religion has certain benefits for society, and we should so know that. And because of that, we try to respect those aspects. Yeah. So then, from a Buddhist point of view, then we talk about these qualities, right? To make it clear for the Buddhist practitioner that you can trust the Buddha because of these reasons. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of an aspect that we can trust the Buddha. Yeah. So that's a little bit about the Buddha. The Dharma, so the Buddha, we say we have the 3 objects of refuge, right? The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yeah, or the teacher, the teachings, and the community. Yeah, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in Sanskrit. Yeah, that's Sanskrit, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So the Buddha we already talked about a little bit. The Dharma, we say the Buddha is the teacher, so to say. That's a very important aspect here. This is very important because that gives a very, very logical reason what refuge actually means. So the Buddha is a teacher, right? The Dharma, we say, is the actual refuge. Yeah, you can pray to the Buddha as much as you like, or even if the Buddha appears in front of you and you can pray and say, oh, please help me, please help me, please help me. And we just talked about the Buddha cannot eliminate our afflictions, right? But he can show us the path. So what is that part? Is the Dharma, right? The Dharma is the actual refuge. Yeah, we say the Buddha is the teacher. The Dharma is the actual refuge. So when a Buddhist goes for refuge, he is going to put these things into practice. The methodology, that's the real safe direction, right? If you follow a methodology to be free of afflictions, if you follow a methodology to be free of anger, if you follow a methodology to be free of strong desire, you know, that's the real freedom, right? That's the real safe direction. So we say the Dharma is the actual refuge. Yeah, so that terminology is very important because what we actually have to do is put the Dharma into practice. The medication, the doctor is important, but the medication is more important than the doctor, right? Yeah, so that's kind of here a similar thing. The Buddha is like the doctor, but the Dharma is like the medication. Yeah, if you don't take the medication, the doctor cannot do much, you know. So for us, very similar. If you don't put the Dharma into practice, then the Buddha think, oh, I tried, but the person's not taking the medicine, right? So it means that the Dharma is the actual treatment, is the actual method, is the actual refuge, the actual safe direction. Because if you practice the Dharma, you eliminate these afflictions. If you eliminate these afflictions, you get more freedom. Right? Yeah. So, and then all the way up to liberation. Yeah? So that means that the Dharma, we say, is the actual refuge. Yeah. What the Dharma actually means, we come to that later. But first, you get the outline. Yeah. So the Buddha is a teacher. The Dharma is the actual refuge, and the Sangha is the community. Yeah, or the spiritual people on the spiritual path. So to say, will help us, like a nurse when you're sick. Yeah, you need support. We are social human beings, right? And you can see, you know, studying Buddhism by yourself or studying Buddhism in a kind of group. In a group is easier, right? You can discuss things, you have similar interests. And some of you have more interest in Buddhism or spirituality in general. And what happens, friends from the past, you lose the connection over time. I had the same thing when I changed my dress, so to say, as you can see, and my hair, you know, it's very easy actually, this kind of style of hair. You only have to cut once every 10 days or something like that. It's cheap. You don't have to go to the barber. You pay at least I saw today, went to a shop, at least 10 or 15, 20 pounds, I think, for just a simple haircut. Yeah. So yeah, it's cheap. Anyway, so I changed my dress and my hair. And then I met a few of my friends from university in the Netherlands. And some thought, oh, Namdak. And called me Martin because it was my name, right? They said, oh, interesting. What do you do? I thought I'm completely crazy or stupid. And some thought, interesting. Yeah. So that means that you change your life. Yeah. So for many of us, it's very similar. If you get into the spiritual part, then you lose interest in certain activities in life, right? For me, same thing. When I was 21, I used to be quite active in the house parties in the early days in 1990, 99, 91, particularly in Rotterdam. It was a kind of the hardcore rave music that attracted me quite a bit. And luckily I didn't take too much drugs, so my brain is still not too bad. But that's what you do, right? When you're young. But when I was 21, I lost all the interest, basically. And then I was a bit stupid in the sense, I mean, not stupid, I'm a bit crazy guy. So then I went more into spiritual part, so to say, Why didn't I tell that story? And I forgot. Where did I start it? Oh yeah, change, yeah. Yeah, so your friends will change after time. So that's quite natural, if you follow a spiritual path, you get some new friends and that gives you support, right? So that's also in this course, we have the different groups and people come together now and then. So we need support. Yeah. So that's kind of what we call the Sangha community. So there's a very general explanation I'm giving right now. Yeah, a very universal and secular almost explanation. Yeah, so we come to, I will explain later what actually is the real traditional explanation of those three jewels of refuge: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yeah, but at least if you quite knew the material, then you get an idea. Yeah? So the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the actual refuge, and then the Sangha is the people who give us support. Yeah, so that's kind of the three jewels of refuge. But there's even more, a little bit more to that, And why is there a little bit more to that? Because the Buddha we already talked about, being free of afflictions and having this great compassion, or what we call bodhicitta. So the Buddha is only motivated to help each and every sentient being without exception. Yeah, if there's a friend, enemy, stranger, whatsoever. Yeah, so also Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you could see 24/7, just working for the benefit of beings constantly. It's very interesting. Whenever there's an animal somewhere, touch, make prayers, and people meeting, take time, sometimes to the extent of missing plates. It's very interesting to see this kind of really taking care of for people. Very compassionate. So that's kind of making because sometimes people start waiting for the guru to come. Yeah, Rinpoche comes. People start with a kata and then Rinpoche sees a dog there and just walks away and just goes to the dog and let everybody just wait. So that's very interesting to see that Rinpoche sometimes see what's most beneficial to that. So it's based on CAUSAL, on this great compassion. Right? So we just talked about those qualities of the Buddha. The Buddha has this all-knowing mind, that is really capable of knowing everything and is free of afflictions, and then has this compassion. Yeah, so then it has a really power to help others. Yeah, so that's kind of what we say the qualities of the Buddha. Yeah, so let's go back to the Dharma. We just talked about the Dharma is the actual refuge, right? So for those who already study a bit more, then it's important to know what does actually mean the Dharma. We just talked about the teachings of the Buddha is a methodology, right? And that's our safe direction. Yeah, but the real explanation, as we find in the scriptures and what actually the Dharma is a mind that is free of afflictions, or particular affliction. Yeah, so if you have a mind that is free of afflictions, that's kind of a real safe direction, right? Yeah. So that's one aspect. There's two aspects to this, right? One of the Dharma is a mind to be free of afflictions, or one affliction or a particular affliction or a group of afflictions. That's one aspect of the Dharma. The other aspect is the method to do that, a realization, and then specifically a direct realization of emptiness, as we call it. Yeah, we come to this later. There's a model on emptiness, I think a few months down the line. Yeah, so when you hear emptiness, you should get ready. Okay. So from now on, today onwards, as soon as you hear emptiness, you say, oh, wow, I have to know this. Yeah. That's that you train your mind and be alert and listen carefully. Yeah. Because emptiness is the key, emptiness is the key to liberate us. Yeah. So because emptiness, the realization of emptiness eliminates ignorance. Yeah. To give you a very short example, and we used that example before, if I count to 3, everybody gets angry. Okay. We all get angry in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. There you go. So then it's quite difficult to generate anger. But if I look at you and say, oh, look at your glasses, look at your hairstyle, look at your tattoo, look at your headphone, so then people say, oh, how dare you say this to me, and then the I comes up and then anger arises within seconds. Yeah? So you can see that affliction, anger is related to a concept of I and mine. Yeah? In a similar way, when you get strong desire, oh, I need that, oh, I need this, I need that, then also you can see I, it's very much related with an I, yeah? And that I seems to exist in a very solid way. But later on, we will see that if you look in your body, you cannot find it anywhere. You look separate from your body, you cannot find it. You look in your mind, you cannot find it. Separate from your mind, you cannot find it, So not being there, or the emptiness, so to say, of this I, that's the key, because all those afflictions are rooted in this concept of I, and if you realize it's not really there the way it appears, then you quite step further. Yeah? So the actual refuge is 2 aspects. Yeah, is one aspect I just said is the mind that is free of afflictions. Yeah, and the other aspect is the methodology that produces that mind free of afflictions, which is a direct realization of emptiness. Yeah, so for the time being, just keep that term in your head, direct realization of emptiness, and then over time we shape the understanding of what emptiness actually means and how can you accomplish this direct realization of emptiness. Yeah, so that's what we call the actual refuge. Because if you have a sophisticated mind like that, you eliminate afflictions together with their seeds, and that's the real safe direction, right? We want to take a safe direction, so we want to have a mind that is free of afflictions, isn't it? So if you think, wow, if I can get a mind, this kind of what I do in what is called ASAMSR, something. This is very soft. Wow, this is amazing. Yeah. I don't know, online you could hear that or not. Yeah. They do that sometimes. Like this, and then they talk like that. Yeah, and do papers like. Yeah. It helps. Some people benefit a lot from calmer mind, right? Yeah. But yeah, I just got into that because I was explaining. But then if you really think, wow, if you have a mind that is free of afflictions, wouldn't that be amazing? So that's kind of, we want to have that mind, right? Or not? Yeah. Or you just want to keep getting angry and strong desire, get completely disturbed and disappointed and no satisfaction. It's up to you, right? We can choose, it's in our hands. I don't tell you to eliminate afflictions. We just give you the drawbacks of afflictions and you check it out yourself. And then you see if you want to get rid of it or not, right? That's up to the individual, But if you really analyze the faults of the afflictions and the real cause of suffering, then you think, wow, that would be amazing to have a mind that is free of afflictions, isn't it? Yeah. So that's kind of a real safe direction, I think. If you want to have a mind that is free of afflictions, that's kind of our safe direction. So we already talked about the possibility of that because the afflictions are not an innate part of the mind. Yeah? We talked about. We also talked about that the afflictions are temporary. They come, you're seeing a message, you get irritated, and they bite and disintegrate. And the afflictions are not in accordance with reality. And that's exactly why afflictions can be taken away. Because they're rooted in this concept of I am mine, and they're rooted in this concept of seeing everything as very concrete. My this, my that. And that's why we get very irritated, For example, if you live with other people in the same house or room, we have all different opinions, right? So somebody says, I want to have this clock here. You say, no, 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 it should be there. And even a simple thing like that can cause a kind of confrontation with each other, or yeah, irritation, right? Yeah, so you can see it's also rooted in an I wanted to have it here. No, 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 it should be there. Yeah, so it's rooted with the concept of I. You can see. So the more, the stronger this I is, the stronger the afflictions are. And you can see also in science exactly the same. Yeah, that a person who is very narcissistic, has, very selfish, yeah, has a very emotional, difficult life, and there's a very interesting research I think I told you about before at Harvard Medical School. What they did is just a very simple, cheap research. You get a group of people, you ask them for 10 minutes conversation, and then you just sit with a counter underneath the table. And then whenever they say I, me, or as De La Soul, was it? Me, myself, and I? De La Soul or the other one? Yeah, De La Soul, yeah. So whenever a person says I, me, myself, because we know from linguistics that what we express is a reflection of our emotional life. Yeah? Same with facial expressions, is a reflection of our inner emotional life. So you sit there on the counter with a counter, and you just count the I's, the me, myself, and I. You count them, and then you put them on the record. Then you do that with 1,000 people, and then you ask the health records, and then you do the statistics, and then they come to the conclusion that people have a higher score in self-concern or a higher score in self-interest that produces more inclination to heart diseases, high blood pressure, depression, mental difficulties. So it's very interesting that not only physical and not only mental, but also physical health is influenced by. So the Buddha 2,500 years ago already said, this I is the cause, is the ignorance. Yeah, so we come to that later. So then if you have a mind here, what we mainly think about, if you have a mind without ignorance, that's even more superior, because then afflictions don't arise anymore. Yeah, so the more you understand emptiness, so to say, or reality, so to say, the lesser the afflictions, they will lose their potential. And you can see that with politicians, you can see that with scientists. If you look at scientists like David Bohm and Carlo Rovelli, for example, who have examined this reality from the point of view of physics, of the point of view of using the language of mathematics, they come to the conclusion there is no solid entities to be found anywhere. And also David Bohm comes to the conclusion that also the self-identity or the self-deceptive thought, as he called it, is just a show. It's not really there. So he also says this self-deceptive thought is a cause for problems in society, make a distinction between us and them, and security and wealth and power, and that generates a lot of confrontations. But he says this self-identity is just a show. It's not really there. Very interesting, so he was influenced, of course, by Krishnamurti philosophy, but he backs it up with mathematics in physics, right? Then when you see him, it's very interesting, when you see him in a dialogue with other physicists or philosophers, he's very easygoing. Yeah, very, very natural, very calm, because he understands the aspect. There's no strong ego, so to say. Very easy to have a conversation, But there's other scientists who sometimes are very strong in their view, and then this I comes up, and then it's very difficult to have a dialogue, you see? So you can see on many levels that this I is a cause for all these problems. Anyway, we come to that later on. Yeah, so for the time being, just think, okay, the Dharma jewel, the actual refuge, is my safe direction, is a mind that is free of afflictions, because that's what I want to accomplish. I want to have a mind free of afflictions, right? And I want to have a mind that has the method to get there. So that's what we call the direct perception of emptiness, or the direct realization of emptiness is the most profound superior method to eliminate ignorance. And if you eliminate ignorance, you eliminate this perception of an I, yeah, the very solid identity of an I. If you eliminate that aspect, then afflictions don't arise anymore. Yeah, that's for the time being. We come to that again, we come to that later. So in the beginning, it's all very complex. We think, what? Ignorance? What? Emptiness? What? Empty of what? Where? No I? Because there is a there is a person, right? You're sitting here, you're listening, people online, they're sitting and listening. Or I think I don't see anybody laying down or something like that. Yeah, so sitting and listening, right? So there's a conventional body is there, and there's a conventional mind that operates, right? If you bang your head against the wall, you know there's a head there and there's a wall. Yeah. So emptiness doesn't mean nothingness, right? So we come to that later. Conventionally, there's a body and a mind, you know, but there's not from its own side an existing entity to be found. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, so same in quantum mechanics, there is no from its own side existing entity to be found. Yeah, so we come to that later. Yeah, so but then you slowly prepare you a little bit, you know, that sinks in over time. Emptiness, the first time you hear about emptiness, for me, same thing. My first teaching of emptiness from His Holiness in 1993 in France. Then also, you know, I was listening to the translation in English, but it didn't make sense, so I just took out headphones. Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, so emptiness takes time. You know, don't get too much into kind of and that's for every course you follow, right? Certain aspects you can understand, good. Certain aspects you don't understand yet, but that's also fine. Yeah, that over time it sinks in. You know, it takes time. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned a little bit, and we come to that later, back in more detail. Yeah. Okay. So then the actual refuge, the Dharma. Because that's our safe direction. We want to be free of suffering, right? So the freedom of suffering is a mind that is free of afflictions. Because we saw already that afflictions, they cause suffering. Yeah, so anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, yeah, they cause suffering. You know, so those afflictions have to be eliminated. Yeah, so the freedom of those afflictions, that's our safe direction, because then we're free of suffering. You see? So that's what we call the actual refuge, is the Dharma jewel. And then in particular, the Dharma, as we say, of being free of afflictions, yeah, or a mind being free of afflictions, and the methods leading towards that freedom. Yeah, that are the two aspects of the Dharma jewel. And more technically, we say the cessation or the absence of afflictions, and the direct perception of emptiness leading to that cessation or absence of afflictions. Yeah, so the real Dharma jewel has two aspects: the absence of afflictions or the lack of afflictions in your mind, and the method leading towards that, which is direct perception of emptiness. Yeah, so the Dharma jewel has two aspects, and that's the actual refuge. That's the real thing that produces happiness, right? That's the real thing that produces the freedom of suffering. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Dharma jewel. The Sangha jewel, similar to the Buddha, we need people we can trust, right? So a real Sangha jewel, technically speaking, is a person with a direct perception of emptiness, meaning that person is on the path eliminating afflictions, right? And we already talked about with the Buddha, if you have a person who doesn't have afflictions, or has eliminated certain levels of coarse afflictions and doesn't have any coarse afflictions anymore, that's a person we can trust, right? Yeah, because that person will never deceive you. That person will, like the Buddha, with compassion, like to help the best way he or she can do, right? So that's kind of the Sangha jewel. The real Sangha jewel, the actual Sangha jewel, is a person which is a noble being, as we say, or an Arya being, meaning a person who has this Dharma jewel in his or her mind. Yeah, so the Dharma jewel we know is twofold, right? An absence of afflictions and the direct perception of emptiness. So if you have a person who has an absence of afflictions and who has a direct perception of emptiness, that person is quite far on the path. You can really trust. That person will never deceive you. That person will only benefit you the best way he or she can. Yeah, so because the level of their realization is on a particular level that the person will never harm anybody, will only benefit. Yeah, so that person we can trust. Yeah, so that's the Sangha jewel. Yeah, is that a bit clear? The three jewels. Yeah. So there are three jewels of refuge. Then another thing, small thing, before we go to the question and answers. We started at 6:30. We go to 8, no? Yeah. So two other things. Before that, I just take something to drink, and then you can just also relax. Yeah. So we talked about what are the three jewels of refuge. Yeah. And what actually does it mean to take refuge? Yeah. Because we can take refuge in we can also take refuge in what we call the Buddha, you know, like Buddha Sakyamuni, the historical Buddha Sakyamuni. Yeah. We can take refuge in the Buddha. That's what we call causal refuge. Yeah. So we are here and we like to go there. Yeah. So that's kind of a causal refuge. You take refuge in the external Buddha, so to say, or Buddha Sakyamuni. That's good, you know. But even more superior is the resultant refuge. The resultant refuge means I take refuge in my own Buddhahood. You know, that's much more superior, right? If you just pray to an external Buddha, oh, please help me, that's good, but the Buddha will tell you, you know, put these things into practice and become a Buddha yourself. So the real, from the point of view of refuge in the Buddha, the actual kind of what we call the resultant refuge, yeah, the resultant refuge is, I want to become a Buddha myself. That's my safe direction. Because if you become a Buddha yourself, you're free of afflictions, right? And you can help others, you know. So that's kind of a real sophisticated. It's very sophisticated. You see, in Buddhism, we don't really talk about a creator or believing in an external force or something like that. We just talk about our own potential, basically, you know, that you want to become a Buddha yourself because we have the potential to do that. And we take refuge in that potential, right? So that's nothing external. It's just within your own mind. You want to become like that. That's your real refuge. If you take refuge in the Buddha, you want to become a Buddha yourself. Then we talked about the Dharma already. If you take refuge in the Dharma, the actual refuge, meaning you want to be free of afflictions yourself, right? That's the actual refuge of the resultant refuge, to be free of afflictions in your own mind. Yeah. And to have this direct perception of emptiness to be able to do that. That's kind of what we call the resultant refuge. That's a very profound one. So you don't look externally, you just look in your own future development, and that's your safe direction. Yeah, so that's kind of, I find it always quite interesting, because Buddhism, the term itself, in Tibetan, we say Nangpa or Nangche for Buddhism, Nangpa for Buddhist. So Nangpa means actually inner being. Nangche means actually inner phenomena. It's a very interesting term, right? That means you don't take real refuge in an external source or something like that. You use a particular method and you develop your mind and you take safe direction in your own development in the future. You see, that's kind of, it's very scientific in one way, and it makes sense, right? To really, because the Buddha cannot give us a particular medicine and all our anger goes. Put a chip in our brain and anger goes, or whatever, you know, you try to do in modern times. It's not possible, unfortunately, you know. So we have to do it ourselves. And to do it ourselves is not easy. Yeah, you know yourself, right? You how to try to not get angry anymore. You know, it's not an easy task, you know, but it's possible over time. And we talk about lifetimes. So if you think about a few decades in your life, first of all, to train your mind, and then if you think about lifetimes, you think, oh, wow, interesting. Then maybe, you know, this may be possible. You get rid of certain coarser forms of anger in 10, 15 years, and then maybe more subtler forms of anger, another 20 years, then you die, and then next lifetime you go on, right? Yeah, I think that insight is very important to as a Buddhist. I find the vast vision very helpful, you know. When I always share, I think I told you before, I'm not sure. When I was not discovering Buddhism, I think it's 2 years, right? Yeah. So where we did a study program is 20 years. Yeah. And then 6 days a week, not one evening a week, 6 days a week. Yeah. So you can imagine that sometimes you get your doubts about the system or the doubts about studies, because the grass is always greener on the side of the fence, so you want to do something else, right? So then I went to the head, who was Kantir Rinpoche, who was the head of the tradition, often a very nice connection, and then he always said, Namdak, he said, you know, you study for a decade or two, and you put it into practice for a decade or two, you do it for a few lifetimes, and then the mind becomes stable. And that makes sense, right? That makes sense, because there is definitely improvement. over a few years, you can definitely see, you know. So if you go and keep going like that, then of course, sometimes we have ups and downs. That's everywhere in life. You follow DB or not, that's everywhere, right? So that's also very important to have this courageous attitude. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to do this. And because if you complete a course like this, you get a very good overview of the whole Buddhist path, right? And then you take things out what you find beneficial and then you put into practice, and then definitely there will be progress. So it's important also when you engage in a program, no, difficult, and then put it aside. So what actually is winning at that time is not you losing, right? The afflictions are winning because the mind gets negative and then, oh, I want to do something else. Oh, this, that. And then you give the victory to the afflictions, as we say. And we shouldn't do that. We should have the victory ourselves. We should be the victorious ones, yeah, over the afflictions. So that's very important to keep going, you know, in this kind of methodologies. It's not easy, I know, you know, but you can do things. If things are difficult in life, you can put all the methodology aside and have difficulties. Or there's one of you can choose yourself, right? Or you have difficulties and do something about it. So that's kind of very important for us to know, to keep going. That's I know long programs always we have dropouts and people question things. Yeah, but it's important to have this determination. No? Yeah. So at least you have problems in life, but at least you do something about it, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's part of my pep talk commitment. I can tick it off. My job description in Jamyang. But it's important. We also got many pep talks in the monastery. It's quite helpful, right? Yeah. So yeah, the Dharma, the resultant Dharma, so the resultant refuge in the Buddha is you yourself becoming Buddha, right? The resultant refuge in the Dharma is yourself being free of afflictions, is yourself having this direct perception of emptiness. Yeah? Then the resultant refuge in the Sangha is that yourself, you become a Sangha jewel. Yourself have this freedom of afflictions and this direct perception of emptiness. Then you become a noble being, as we say, and then you can really help others, right? Yeah, because you know you're stuck also in samsara before, or you're stuck in the afflictions before, and now at least some afflictions are gone, and you have an insight into ultimate reality, so you can help others much better, right? Yeah. Same if you want to help a person with stopping smoking. If you smoked before and you're free of it, you can help that person, right? Or a person goes through depression and you went through a depression, you got out of it, you can help that person much better. So that means that if you're free of it, you have much more insights. Yeah? So if you become the Sangha jewel of having this absence of afflictions and this CAUSAL, realization of emptiness, then you can do with something. Is that a bit clear? The resultant refuge is kind of a refuge. You take refuge in your own Buddhahood, in your own realizations, in your own becoming a noble being. Yeah? While the causal refuge is you take refuge in Buddha Sakyamuni, for example, or in general, in this realization of emptiness or this absence of afflictions, yeah, or people who have these realizations in their mind as a Sangha jewel. Yeah. So there's an external one. Yeah, the causal refuge is external, and the resultant refuge is from within yourself. Yeah, we say Nangpa, inner being for Buddhists. Yeah, the real term Buddhist means Nangpa, means inner being. You know, yeah, so it's a very interesting term. You know, yeah. So being a Buddhist doesn't mean sometimes you see, particularly in India, when there's Westerners who come to Dharamsala or something or other Buddhist places, and then they wear all these malas, you know. These kind of what do you call them? Prayer beads, you know, around their wrists, and then these particular bags with sign of a monastery, a nunnery, or something like that. Walk around like that. I'm a Buddhist, but that doesn't mean you're a Buddhist, right? The real Buddhist is you shouldn't see from the outside. It's an inner transformation, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's the 3 jewels of refuge. So I forgot to mention 2 more things I was planning to do today. So yeah, so that's clear, no? A little bit, I think, the qualities of the 3 jewels of refuge. Yeah, in a very brief kind of presentation. Then also for taking refuge, you have 2 causes for taking refuge. Yeah, so that's also important to know. 2 causes for taking refuge. Yeah, the first cause, because we need a motivator. Why do we take refuge? There should be a reason, right? And why do we take refuge in a particular direction? There should be a reason, you know? So there's 2 causes for taking refuge, or 2 reasons for taking refuge. The first one, yeah, we say the fear Fear has a little bit of a negative quotation in modern society. It's not the fear that is unconstructive, not constructive like anxiety or something, not that kind of thing, but it's a kind of the fear of suffering, as we say. Yeah, and basically that means not wanting suffering. Yeah, having understood suffering and having a wish to be free of it. Yeah, so that's kind of, you know, for example, in the monastery at night, when we came back from debate, it's warm and then it cools down, but the roads are still kind of warm, you know, this kind of bitumen that we call bitumen, yeah. So they keep warm. So the snakes sometimes they like that. Yeah. So when you go back home walking, you know, if you have a little bit fear of snakes, it helps you to be careful. not to the extreme of anxiety and freaking out, right? Because that's not very constructive, but just think, okay, I have to be careful, right? That's a constructive form of fear, you know? So in a similar way, if you think, oh, suffering, you know, you contemplate suffering and you think, I don't want this suffering because of this and this reason, right? It's a very constructive way. Yeah, so it's kind of very scientific, so to say. So that kind of, we don't want suffering, or we say the fear of suffering. Yeah, that understanding the suffering and then think, okay, I don't want this. I want to do something about it. Yeah, so Shantideva said often, if you have a problem in life and you can solve that problem, why worry too much? You know, why think about it too much? Solve it. Yeah, it's very direct methodology. Yeah. If you have a problem in life and you cannot solve it, that also happens to us sometimes, unfortunately, then you should also not worry about it because you cannot solve it anyway. You should just have acceptance, right? Yeah. And then there's much more freedom in the mind. Otherwise, you create much more suffering for yourself by thinking about it in a particular way. If you cannot do anything about it, like old age, for example. We all gonna get older. Yeah. Oh. So when you get older, then over 50, 60 is down the hill, basically. It's to be, yeah, we have to be realistic, right? Your hairline is withdrawing, your gums are withdrawing, and then physically exercise or something like that becomes more difficult, and mind sometimes also gets more difficult. So it's basically down the hill. You got a certain, we cannot stop that process, you know, that's a reality. And in the monastery, because we 20 years in the program, as I just mentioned, so in 20 years, people change, especially the hairline changes. For me also, it's, you see, first was like this, now it's a little bit, you know, like that, and gray hair, you know. So in the monastery, we measure, you know, 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers considered as bald. So and in the monastery, we joke about those things, right? It's very interesting. We play with the ego and we play with, there's no harmful thought behind saying, oh, your hairline is withdrawing, and or you're too fat, or you're too thin, or it's very normal. Yeah. So in the Tibetan community, especially in the monastic system, it's all to do with crushing down the ego and seeing that the ego is the problem. Yeah. Because we cannot prevent it from getting gray hair and the hairline withdrawing, getting wrinkles, and the gums withdrawing, and this kind of, you know, things. Yeah. When I was 40 something, then I went to a doctor. I mean, to how do you call that? Optician. Yeah. And then a very nice doctor, a Muslim, was in South India. A Muslim, yeah, nurse kind of person. And he said, oh, sorry, sir. After that age, your eyes have to be adjusted. She didn't say, you're getting old and there's decay. And people don't like to talk about it, but that's the reality, right? Yeah, so yeah, that's the kind of a reality that's there. So we cannot do anything about the reality. So we shouldn't worry about it too much because it doesn't help, you know? So that's kind of, yeah, that's the quotation of Shantideva, very powerful. Yeah, luckily we can do something about suffering. Yeah, so that means a very constructive form of fear, because you see, okay, there's a problem and I can do something about it. Yeah, so the first cause for refuge is not wanting suffering or the fear of suffering. Yeah. The second cause of refuge is to have a methodology that has the potential to help you to be free of suffering. Yeah, so if you have a methodology that has the potential to help you to be free of suffering, that's kind of a direction, right? You have a problem and you have a method to solve it. So there's the 2 perfect causes together. So with taking refuge is exactly the same. You have suffering you don't want, and you have a methodology that helps you to get rid of suffering. So that's actually what we call the two causes for taking refuge. You see, you have a problem, and you see there's a method with potential, right? So the Buddha has the potential to help us by his teachings, right? And this Dharma jewel has the real potential to eliminate afflictions, yeah? And the Sangha jewel has this incredible potential to help us. So that means that we know we have a problem with the suffering, one cause of taking refuge, and we fear the suffering, we don't want that suffering. And the other potential, the potential to help you to eliminate that fear or to eliminate that suffering is right there. You know, so that's actually, that directs us like, oh wow, yes, I know, you know, anger, attachment, you know, anxiety, fear, jealousy, pride, depression is a cause for suffering. And it's possible to do something about it. So I should follow that method, you see? So that's kind of giving you the direction into a safe direction, as we call it, or taking refuge. Yeah, does it make sense or not? Yeah, so in one way, it's very scientific, you know, no external force. You take refuge in your own possibility of eliminating afflictions by following a particular method. Yeah, so we say Buddhism is more mind science than it's not really religion as such. Yeah, so Buddhism is actually mind science. You don't have to become a Buddhist to put this all into practice even, right? Yeah, so even Carlo Rovelli, one of the physicists we had a dialogue with, and he's very close to his understanding of emptiness, how we present it in quantum mechanics. And he asked me once offline, he said, do I have to become a Buddhist to really understand this? Very interesting. So I told him, no, really, you know, if you just want to use, you know, common sense logic and based on his findings, you can get an intellectual understanding of it. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to become Buddhist for that purpose, right? Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, sometimes interesting kind of conversations you have. Yeah, so, okay. So yeah, just to summarize before we go to the question and answers. So we talked about a few things today. We talked about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? And then the qualities of the Buddha, that the Buddha is this person who is free of afflictions, and that's why we can trust the Buddha. And the Buddha is very skillful in the methodology to eliminate afflictions. Yeah? And the Buddha doesn't make a distinction between friend, enemy, stranger, or those who benefit or harm. So this kind of person we can trust. Yeah? But then, if you didn't think yourself you become like that, that's even a more sophisticated form of taking refuge, right? That you yourself become like this person, having these qualities, having an all-knowing mind, having this incredible compassion, having no afflictions, then you can really do something, right? Yeah. So we're very limited in what we can do for others, you know. But if you have this incredible capacity of a Buddha, you think, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so that's kind of the Buddha jewel. And then the Dharma jewel, the Buddha is a teacher. The Dharma jewel is the actual refuge. And why is it called the actual refuge? Because it produces the actual safe direction. If you fear suffering and you have a methodology to get rid of that fear of suffering, then that's your safe direction. That's why we say the Dharma is the actual refuge, because we take refuge in our own mind to be free of afflictions. And the method of a direct perception of emptiness to do that. And so what direct perception of emptiness is, we come to it later. So for the time being, you heard it now. Don't worry too much. Don't have nightmares about it, or I hope you don't have, right? So don't worry about too much. We come to that later again and again. Yeah. So, and then the Sangha jewel are these beings who we can trust, who have these realizations. Yeah. So who can help us, you know? Yeah. So we need, you know, the part we need supportive people around us who help us. Yeah, you can do that this or can do that, and then we move. Yeah. And that's the reason to refuge is the most superior one, yeah, that your own Buddhahood, your own freedom of afflictions, so freedom of suffering, yeah, and your own kind of becoming this Arya being. That's kind of the real safe direction in life. Yeah. Yeah. So kyop, in Tibetan we say kyop is actually, sometimes we say, is a kind of protection. That's what it means, right? Protection from suffering or protection from afflictions. That's the real meaning of taking refuge, you know, because if you develop your mind with lesser and lesser afflictions, there's lesser and lesser suffering. So that's the real protection we have, right? Yeah. So it's not out there, but it's our own development. We have to put a lot of effort in our own development for that purpose. And it's not easy. We know that it's not easy to an affliction. And sometimes practicing patience goes okay for a few weeks, and then you meet another person, and guess what? You lose it all. right? Yeah. That's normal, you know. So, but at least you're more aware of it, and you do something more about it, and then over time you move. Right? So don't give up too early. Yeah, because if you give up too early, you know, then it's kind of one step ahead, two steps back, right? So it's better to stay on the path, and eventually it will become less. You know? Sometimes you get some obstacles, and then over time it will become less. Yeah. So that's, yeah. So the two causes for refuge is the fear of the suffering we don't like. Yeah. And the other cause for refuge is seeing the potential in the three jewels, and in the particular in the resultant aspect of your own Buddhahood, in your own absence of afflictions. That's the real potential that is there. So we take that same direction. Yeah. So we have two causes that moves us in that direction, not wanting suffering and seeing the potential of our mind to be able to do that. You know? Yeah. Yeah, that's more or less what I was planning to do. We have 2 more evening sessions on refuge. So we will, yeah, go over it again. So digest a little bit more, and then, yeah, then it will sink in over time. Let's put it that way. So yeah, we can open up for questions for the English speaking, I would say, English speaking, yeah, students, people, yeah, because the Spanish ones I meet separately. Yeah, I don't know which date, but we have those dates, right? Yeah, yeah, because then, yeah, Spanish people, otherwise it takes a lot of time with the translator. So I dedicate one extra session to them once every model. Okay, yeah, so online, or are we here? What do we do? Start? Can start here? Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. So I have few questions.
Few.
Few. So the first one is, if Buddhism is like a medicine, is that medicine for the three scopes and the three vehicles in ultimate nature are the same one?
Yeah, that's a bit too advanced yet. We come to that later. That's true, because the realization of emptiness, right, which is direct perception of emptiness, that's one of the aspects of the Dharma jewel. Yeah. So that's very important to achieve liberation. That's very important to achieve Buddhahood. And in all the three vehicles, you need that realization. So that's kind of definitely true. You know, so that kind of actual refuge is also needed in the three scopes, you could say. I mean, for the small scope, of course, if you have understanding of emptiness, it will reduce afflictions. If you reduce afflictions, you will reduce the 10 non-virtues, right? Yeah, so it's important. But I was planning to talk about a little bit more elaborately next week about the three scopes in relation with refuge, because you can take refuge today. We talked about the general aspect of refuge, fear of suffering, and and the potential to be free of suffering, right? So that's a general aspect of the middling scope. So next week I was thinking to explain the refuge according to the three scopes of the Lamarim. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you talk about the Buddha. We put the refuge, the actual refuge, the Dharma, into method. Is that means putting wisdom, compassion, emptiness to method? To method.
Method, yeah, we generally speaking say the method to eliminate suffering, right, is this direct perception of emptiness. Yeah, but direct perception of emptiness is wisdom. If you put it in the two-fold division, method and wisdom. Yeah, so then we talk about slightly different. Yeah, so here we just say method in general. But if you talk about among the two, method and wisdom, then belongs to the wisdom aspect, right? Yeah.
Okay, so the last one is if we take refuge in our resultant, so the resultant refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Yeah. If we are talking about the resultant refuge in Sangha in ourselves, do we
become a Sangha?
Yeah, do we really need to become a monastic? No. In that sense?
No. You have to have a direct perception of emptiness. That's basically the Sangha jewel is a person who has direct perception of emptiness. If it's a monk or nun or lay person, that doesn't matter. Yeah, so the real Sangha jewel is actually a person with a direct perception of emptiness, right? Yeah, but there's a conventional Sangha, meaning monks and nuns, and in particular, for fully ordained monks or for fully ordained nuns, is be considered as a conventional Sangha jewel. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes. The gentleman there. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Geshe. So I've got a fairly good grasp on seeking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma. However, the Sangha kind of trips me up. Seeking refuge in a Sangha, would that count maybe coming to places like this and just learning, or is it just keeping them in your heart when you meditate or something like that? Is it literal, or is it?
I mean, I said the real Sangha jewel, the real Sangha jewel is basically a person who has a direct perception of emptiness, generally speaking. Yeah, so that's kind of what we call the real Sangha jewel. But then on a conventional level, we talk about 4 fully ordained monks or 4 fully ordained nuns. Yeah, so there's a lot of more things to say about, because then the Dharma abides in that place whenever they are present, so there's more things to say. But for a beginner, you don't have to worry about those things too much. You mainly think about your own Buddhahood, your own freedom of afflictions, and you yourself become a Sangha jewel. Right, so that's the real powerful refuge, is a resultant refuge, that you yourself get this direct perception of emptiness. You yourself become this realized being to help others, right? So that's the more sophisticated aspect, Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? No? No? Online, yeah. So a few yellow hands.
Doji Kanjo, welcome to BP. You have a question?
Hi, thank you, Geshe. I'm online.
You can hear me online?
Hi. Yes, hi. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? No, yes?
Allez.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm not sure because I can't hear any response.
Yeah, one second. Yeah, try again.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, hi.
Hi.
Thank you, Geshe. My question is about saying the refuge prayer, because I feel like every time I say the refuge prayer, I actually feel like I'm lying, because the truth is 99.9% of my life, sadly, I'm not taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha.
Okay.
So I guess I always feel like if I could adapt it to say, like, I aspire to take refuge in the Buddha Dharma, that would be authentic. But in the wording as it is, it does, it's sadly not my truth. So I'd love some advice around that.
Yeah. So don't lie.
Yes.
Yeah. No, joking. There's a practice called accumulation of refuge. When you sit down in a retreat and you accumulate this prayer, Sangha Chudens 100,000 times, So you can do that like a MP3 player, or how do you call it these days? You used to have those tape recorders, but MP3 player, you can say? No? Yeah? Sorry, I'm a bit old-fashioned. Yeah, so that doesn't really impact, The real refuge actually is not reciting the prayer, The real refuge is sitting down and contemplating those 2 causes for taking refuge, right? If you really understand suffering, and you understand the cause of suffering, and then you have a wish to be free of that, and you look for methods to be free of that. That's, if you recite a prayer or not, that's the real refuge, right? The prayer is just for us to have this mindset together with a kind of verbalization of it to help us to think about. So whenever you start with a refuge prayer, actually the real thing to do it is, before you start taking refuge, you contemplate those 2 causes for taking refuge. Yeah. So that means you sit down and think about the suffering of samsara, for example, and think about the cause of the suffering, of the afflictions, and the wish to be free of that, and then see, oh, this methodology of the Dharma actually has the potential to help me, And then based on that, think, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to train my mind. I'm going to use this method. And then recite the prayer. That's a sophisticated form, right? And that's not lying anymore, because you analyze it. That's the thing, In Buddhism, we talk a lot about research it, analyze it. Don't believe it, Check it out. Check it out for yourself, it's true or not. Don't just say because Namdak, he stayed in the monastery for 20 years, he should know, and I just believe him. That's not the right attitude, right? Whatever I say, you should check it out. Are those afflictions really possible to eliminate? Are they really a cause for suffering? You analyze that, right? And does this method really help me to eliminate that? And then you take refuge. That's kind of a sophisticated form of taking refuge, right? Not just the words by itself, but the meaning behind it, you know? Yeah, that makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
And then there's no lying anymore, you see? Not even to yourself. Yeah.
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 Thank you. Erin?
Yeah. Yeah, unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for hearing my question. I was just wondering that over the, thousands of years of Buddhism, that all of those that have become a Buddha themselves where are they all now? Like, is it they're like it's a little discouraging with Buddhism because it's always like, well, in a bunch of lifetimes you can do this, but it would be, it makes it feel like it's so far away that it's never going to happen. And then it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people who have actually accomplished it that I can see. I know there are some realized people, but where are the bodhisattvas? Are they still active and helping? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good question.
What happens?
What happens
to all the everyone who has become?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, they manifest in various forms, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for example, we can see as an aspect, I mean, if you don't believe straight away he's a Buddha, then at least he must be a very high realized being, if you really see the capacities of not sleeping and 24/7 working for the benefit of others without break, that's quite impressive, And also in certain institutions we can see, or in retreats, certain kind of people in retreat, they show very uncommon kind of aspects, So some are Buddhas, some are very high realized, So there's a variety of various people, and we don't know, we don't never know who's in front of us. That's another aspect, We only see a physical appearance, and we hear a verbal aspect or verbal expression, but we cannot read a mind, so we don't know if this person is a Buddha or not. Right? And most Buddhas, when they show an ordinary aspect, they say, I'm just a simple person. They won't say I'm a Buddha sometimes, out of kind of humbleness, So there's definitely Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around us, for sure. And I've seen, like, being close to people like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for example, there is not an ordinary person, You can feel there is an incredible blessing there, and the person shows aspects that a normal human body cannot do, or people will go without food, go without eating, just live on air, you have to be highly realized. It doesn't imply to be Buddha, but you can see there are these incredible beings around us, and some are Buddhas and some are high realized. And that's one aspect. The other aspect is 2,500 years since the Buddha came and taught. It's not very long, To become a Buddha might take a little bit longer. so to train our mind takes time, right? In certain scriptures, we talk about 3 countless eons, with this many lifetimes, not just 2,000 years. We think, oh, wow, 2,000 years, that's a lot. But if you think about billions of years of world evolution, it's peanuts, right? So, and to train your mind takes time, So for sure, there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas amongst us, and I've seen incredible beings, And for sure, there must be, if not Buddhas, highly realized, So that's for sure. In the West, sometimes maybe you don't have the access to these kind of beings, but you can think about it. There's definitely beings around us, and they won't stand in the middle of the big crowd and say, "Hey, all people quiet, listen to me. I'm a Buddha." You know that? Then probably that person maybe not a Buddha. They're very skillful in the ways of leading disciples. I hope that helps a bit.
Thank you very much. It does help.
Okay, good, great. You have a follow-up on that, or? I'm not. No, I'm just.
No, it was a great answer.
I'm just an ordinary monk and grown up in the Netherlands and hanged out in the monastery 20 years. And then Rinpoche asked me to hang out in London, so that's why I'm here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, next.
We're running a bit short of time. Might be a few minutes over.
Okay.
Abalada, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's great to see you again, Geshe.
Good to see you too.
Teaching. Thank you. I have a very general question and a very specific question related to today's teaching. The general one concerns the passing away of Lama Sopa Rinpoche, and also the event where His Holiness the Dalai Lama was, accused of pedophilia about a month. And these events happened almost at the same time, about a month ago. And I personally, I have unconditional support for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I had my own personal campaign on my Facebook page, and I was sharing, videos coming from Eastern countries and also Western countries, and I think it was a great opportunity for dialogue. And in that context, I was very impressed by the Global Buddhist Summit in New Delhi, where His Holiness was acknowledged as one of the great leaders of a whole world Buddhist community, not just the Tibetan Buddhist Mahayana tradition. And so that's very, very inspiring as well. Now, in this context, I participated yesterday in the precious teaching that Khensul Jado Rinpoche gave, and you presented him. You were in Nepal, I believe, yesterday, right? And you presented the teaching on the 7-point mind training. Yeah, and I was very, very happy and grateful for that. It's a great teaching. It's something in itself, very complete, a Dharma teaching, I thought. So my general question is if you could, explain to us what's going on, and you're so connected.
Going on?
Yeah, you're very connected to Kopan as well, and what is the role?
Where?
To the monastery of Kopan.
In Kopan, Ale.
Yeah, Kopan. And what is the role of Khensul Jado Rinpoche?
What is the
role? Yeah.
In Kopan Monastery, because normally when a person passes away, we do various practices and prayers for that person, right? So for 49 days, that's mostly the period an ordinary person is in the intermediate state, or the bardo. So in Kopan, they do all kind of prayers and practices 24/7 for that period. So why do we do that? In order to create causes to meet Rinpoche in the future. So if there's a Buddha, if Rinpoche is a Buddha, then the Buddha also can only act and help beings according to their wishes, right? If you don't wish for Buddha in front of yourself, the Buddha will not come. So the Buddha doesn't show in front of you, say, sit down, you listen to me, I teach you. That's not how it works, right? You have to have some interest from your own side, otherwise it doesn't work. So that's why we make these prayers, to make a cause, because everything is cause and effect related, right? Everything is a nature of cause and effect relationship. So you need to create causes for a reason to come about. So that's why we do these prayers. In Kopan. Then, and in different centers also here, we do various prayers on a regular basis for that purpose. Then Kushe Jado Rinpoche, who is was the abbot in Namgyal, and then also abbot in Gyute, so abbot of big monasteries. So Jado Rinpoche is a very influential, qualified teacher in the Gelug tradition, so to say. He hasn't taught much in the West because he kept always very, very low key, even in the Tibetan monasteries. When you heard that he was giving a special teaching or a secret teaching, you went to see him and he said, okay, you can come, but nobody else. Don't tell anybody else. So he had always very small groups. And then he was taught by his own teachers, you have to teach more, and then he only started in bigger groups. So now in India, in particular Mongolia, he's a very a big, incredible source for the Buddha Dharma in the flourishment of Buddhism in Mongolia, for example. And now he starts teaching in the rest of the world, and in particular FPMT.
Thank you. That's a cause for great hope. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a very specific question. Is there time?
Maybe next time, because we have 2 hours.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Okay, fine.
So Alejandro, you have an opportunity to go to the question and answer session on the 1st of June, or do you need to ask your question now?
Thank you, Geshe. It's great to have you back. My question is regarding to the two causes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My question is regarding to the two causes of going for refuge. You mentioned that the first one is fear.
Avalado, can you mute yourself? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Two causes for refuge. Yeah.
The first one is the fear of the suffering. And the second one, you mentioned that is the method, if it's correct.
Yeah.
And I hear, like, I have two questions regarding to each cause. The first one, the fear, sometimes when contemplating the cause of suffering, it causes fear, but it's a fear of freezing, like not acting. Maybe going, like having thoughts of self-deception that we're gonna suffering, or like you kind of freeze, like when you see a lion and you don't run, you just freeze. What would you be your advice to use that fear or transform that fear from
so as I said before, it has to be a constructive form of fear, right? You know, if you're in a difficult situation and you just freeze, then it might not be the right solution. Yeah, sometimes you have to act, you know. So that's here the same thing. We have to act. We see, okay, there's a problem, and we're going to do something about it, right? If you see, oh, there's a problem, oh, there's a problem, oh, there's a problem, then that doesn't really, is not very constructive, right? But if you see a problem and say, okay, there's a problem, and there's a method, and I'm going to solve it. So you have to, you know, shake up in the sense of seeing the suffering, but also see the potential to do something about it, to see the suffering is caused by these afflictions, and they can be taken away, you know. So that's kind of, you needed action, right? Yeah.
Thank you. And the second question is about the second cause of refuge. For me, like I've been studying it, the second cause is as the faith or confidence to the method. Is it the same?
Yeah, so today I explain this quite in a general or secular universal way, but it actually is the faith in the potential the three jewels have, right? Yeah. So that means that, and that faith is not blind faith, that faith is based on reasoning. You see, especially in the reasoned refuge, and in particular, the actual refuge of the Dharma, you see, okay, afflictions are caused by this ignorance. If you take the ignorance away, afflictions don't arise. So I need a mind that is able to do that, you see? And then you generate faith. Oh, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. So that's kind of a faith based on reasoning, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to clarify that point. Yeah. Yeah, last one, Judy. Yeah.
Yeah, hello, Geshe. Thank you for your teachings. Thank you. Nice to see you. It's just, I don't know, I'm going to jumble up my words, and I'm a bit tired from my nursing work today, but in courses of taking refuge, fear of suffering and understanding its causes, wishing to be free of it. Great, yeah, fantastic. Knowing there's a methodology to be free of it, that's all incredible. But I'd say for me, and I think for many other people, what's drawn us towards spirituality in general is sort of more awe and wonder, you know, incredible experiences, and hey, wow, where are we all coming from? Where are we all going? What's it all about? You know, what are these incredible dreams about? What are these images I'm seeing? And that, you know, and also I think thinking about taking refuge in our Buddha nature. And I put words together because taking refuge in our Buddha nature to me is the same as taking refuge in our internal God nature or Christ-like nature or our Atma, which is pure consciousness within, and it's internal and it's external. So I think you dive in deeper to your Buddha potential, the whole of reality will become apparent to you, and it'll be amazing. And I suppose actually to have that experience more consistently, we do of course need to be getting rid of all these horrible afflictions. But for me, it inspires me much. I don't find just the idea of, it wasn't, I think when I first looked into spirituality, I was suffering a lot, yes, but it wasn't that inspired me. It was more, hey, wow, you know. And I think, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. But yeah, it would be wonderful to be free of suffering and to be able to be of incredible benefit to all sentient beings. That's incredibly inspiring. Thank you.
So what was the question? Ale.
It was just a comment, really. It's kind of,
Ale, oh, yeah.
when I think about taking refuge just to get rid of my own suffering, it doesn't inspire me, even though it could. It's not initially what inspired me towards Buddhism or anything else. It doesn't feel inspiring. It feels limiting. It feels I'm focusing on suffering again. And actually, like all of us, you know, I know life is an incredible thing, and I want to understand it. I want to understand eternity and the source of all being, and things like that inspire me more. And I think that's all. I just don't find that wouldn't inspire me to take refuge, really, the fear of suffering. I don't think.
Huh? Ale, okay, yeah.
That's all. It's just a comment because
the fear of suffering is a general kind of aspect of what we talked about, right? And then next week I'm going to talk about the 3 scopes of the Lamrim, and then it becomes more clear, this aspect of one of the causes for taking refuge.
So this is just one of the causes. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Just hang in there. Next
Sure.
week. It's not too difficult, 1 week, right?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
thank you,
much.
everybody. Sorry, 15 minutes over time. So yeah, let's dedicate, because we talked about a few important things, right? And things that can change our lives and help others also to, become better human beings. So try to also make a strong prayer in that direction, where we cite the dedication prayers, and think that developing yourself and help not only yourself to be free of suffering, but also help others to achieve the same, to actually become a refuge for others as well. So try to dedicate in that way. Dagi jine sabe gewati tendan jowa kula gampendan kiba jesun lo zangaba yi tempe nipo du jo. May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable, and may all beings equal in the state of happiness, and may I and others without exception accumulate merit, purify negativities, and may be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Janjo Sempyo Rinpoche, Magye Panan Gyege, Gyebai Nyamba Mebayam, Gone Gombe Belwar Jo Doni Tawa Rinpoche, Magye Panan Gyege, Gyebai Nyamba Mebayam. Okay, thank you so much, everybody here this evening and people online, and then see you next week. Okay,
thank you.